They said stay in the airport lounge, Grandma. We'll come back for you after check-in. But I had other plans. You won't believe what this 72-year-old grandmother did when her own grandchildren abandoned her at the airport with nothing but a boarding pass to nowhere. By the time I was done with them, they learned that you should never underestimate someone who raised 6 children, survived the Great Recession, and still remembers how to make a grown man cry with just a phone call. My name is Eleanor, and at 72 years old, I thought I'd seen every kind of betrayal life could throw at me. I was wrong. Dead wrong. What my own flesh and blood did to me at Denver International Airport on what was supposed to be our family vacation will make your blood boil. But what I did back? Well, let's just say revenge is a dish best served at 30,000 feet. It all started 3 months ago when my grandson Jake called me up, all sweet and charming like he used to be when he was 7 years old and wanted an extra cookie. "Grandma Eleanor," he said in that honeyed voice, "how would you like to go on a family trip to Hawaii? All expenses paid, just you, me, my sister Emma, and cousin Tyler, like old times." Now, I should have known something was fishy right then and there. Jake hadn't called me just to chat in over 2 years. The last time I'd seen him was at Christmas, and he'd spent the entire time glued to his phone, barely acknowledging my homemade apple pie that took me 6 hours to make from scratch. But I'm a grandmother, and when your grandchild calls talking about family time, your heart wants to believe it's genuine. "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart," I told him, already imagining us building sandcastles and sharing stories under the Hawaiian sun like we used to when they were little. "But are you sure about the expenses? I know you kids are just starting out in your careers." "Oh, don't worry about that, Grandma. We've all been saving up and we want to treat you. You deserve it, after everything you've done for our family." The way he said it, so sincere, so loving, it reminded me of the little boy who used to climb into my lap and tell me I was his favorite person in the whole world. I should have listened to my gut. At 72, you develop pretty good instincts about people, even your own family. But love makes you stupid sometimes, and I loved those kids more than my own life. The planning went on for weeks. Jake would call every few days with updates about the resort, the flights, the activities we'd do together. Emma, his 24-year-old sister, even sent me pictures of the beautiful beach where we'd be staying. Tyler, their 26-year-old cousin, texted me about the luau we'd attend and the snorkeling excursions he'd booked for us. It felt like the old days when they actually cared about spending time with their grandmother. I spent those 3 months getting ready for what I thought would be the trip of a lifetime. I bought new clothes, a whole wardrobe of floral dresses and comfortable sandals. I got my hair done at the salon for the first time in 6 months. I even went to the doctor to make sure I was healthy enough for all the activities they had planned. I was so excited I could barely sleep the night before our departure. The morning of the trip, Jake picked me up in his new BMW, another red flag I ignored. When did a 25-year-old customer service representative afford a BMW? But I was too caught up in the excitement to ask questions. He helped me with my luggage, kissed my cheek, and told me how happy he was that we were finally doing this trip. "Grandma, you're going to love Hawaii. The weather's going to be perfect, and I've planned so many special surprises for you." Emma and Tyler met us at the airport, both dressed in expensive designer clothes that definitely didn't match their supposed entry-level salaries. But again, I pushed down my concerns. Maybe they'd been more successful than I realized. Maybe they were just really good at saving money. We checked in together at the counter, and that's when I started to notice the first real signs that something wasn't right. The airline agent kept looking at her computer screen with a confused expression, typing and retyping something. She called over a supervisor, and they had a hushed conversation while looking at my boarding pass. "Is everything okay?" I asked Jake, but he just smiled and squeezed my shoulder. "Just some technical difficulties, Grandma. Nothing to worry about." The agent finally handed me my boarding pass with an apologetic smile. "I'm sorry for the delay, Mrs. Patterson. Everything is set now. Have a wonderful flight." I looked at my boarding pass and noticed something odd. While Jake, Emma, and Tyler all had seat assignments in the same row, mine just said, "Seat assignment at gate." But Jake quickly explained that away too. Sometimes they have to assign seats for seniors at the gate, Grandma. It's totally normal. We'll make sure you're sitting with us. After we got through security, Jake suggested we grab some food before our flight. Why don't you wait in that nice lounge over there, Grandma? It's got comfortable chairs and air conditioning. We'll go get us all some sandwiches and meet you back there in a few minutes. The lounge was indeed nice. Leather chairs, big windows overlooking the runway, complimentary snacks and drinks. I settled in with a magazine, feeling grateful that my grandchildren were taking such good care of me. Other travelers were bustling around, wheeling their luggage and checking their phones, but I felt peaceful and excited about our upcoming adventure. 20 minutes passed, then 30, then an hour. I started checking my phone, wondering where they could be. The departure boards showed that our flight to Honolulu was now boarding, but there was still no sign of Jake, Emma, or Tyler. I called Jake's phone. It went straight to voicemail. I tried Emma, same thing. Tyler wasn't answering either. A cold knot started forming in my stomach, but I told myself they were probably just caught up in a long line somewhere. I gathered my purse and carry-on and headed toward our gate, thinking maybe they were waiting for me there. But when I got to gate A23, the airline agent looked at my boarding pass and frowned. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but there seems to be some confusion. This boarding pass is for a flight that doesn't exist." "What do you mean it doesn't exist?" I asked, my voice starting to shake. She typed my confirmation number into her computer and shook her head. "According to our system, this reservation was canceled about an hour ago. There's no record of you having a valid ticket to Honolulu today." The world started spinning around me. "But my grandchildren, they bought these tickets. We're traveling together." "Ma'am, do you have their names? Let me check if they have reservations." With trembling hands, I gave her Jake's, Emma's, and Tyler's full names. She typed for what felt like an eternity while I stood there, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I don't show reservations under those names for today's flights to Honolulu. Are you sure about the date and destination?" I stumbled back to the lounge, my legs barely able to carry me. I collapsed into the same leather chair where I'd been sitting so happily just an hour before, and that's when I saw it. On the table next to my chair was a folded piece of paper with my name written on it in Jake's handwriting. With shaking fingers, I opened it and read the words that would be burned into my memory forever. "Dear Grandma Eleanor, we're sorry it had to be this way, but we didn't know how else to do it. We need you to understand that we can't take care of you anymore. You're getting older, and we have our own lives to live. We've arranged for someone from Sunset Manor Assisted Living to pick you up from the airport in about 2 hours. They're expecting you, and your room is already paid for the first month. We've also taken the liberty of putting your house on the market. The realtor said it should sell quickly, and the money will help pay for your care. We know you're probably upset right now, but this is really for the best. You'll be much safer in a facility where trained professionals can look after you. We've already started moving your things out of the house. Don't worry, we saved all the important stuff. We hope someday you'll understand that we did this because we love you. Jake, Emma, and Tyler. P.S. Your medications are in the side pocket of your purse. We made sure you had enough for a few days." I read that letter 3 times before the full magnitude of their betrayal sank in. These children I had raised, loved, and sacrificed for had just orchestrated the most elaborate and cruel abandonment I could have imagined. They had used my trust, my love for them, and my excitement about a family trip to essentially kidnap me and force me into a nursing home against my will. But here's what my dear grandchildren didn't know about their sweet old grandmother. I wasn't just some helpless old lady they could manipulate and discard. I had raised 6 children as a single mother after their grandfather died in Vietnam. I had worked 3 jobs to put their parents through college. I had survived breast cancer, the death of my husband, and the 2008 financial crisis that wiped out half my retirement savings. More importantly, I had spent 35 years working as a legal secretary for Morrison Klein and Associates, one of the most prestigious law firms in Colorado. I knew more about property law, elder abuse, and fraud than my grandchildren had ever bothered to learn, and I still had friends in very high places. Sitting in that airport lounge, reading their pathetic excuse for an explanation, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Pure, cold rage. Not the hot anger that makes you say things you regret, but the calculated fury that makes you plan, plot, and execute perfect justice. I took out my phone and started making calls. My first call was to my dear friend Margaret, who happened to be a real estate attorney and had been my maid of honor 45 years ago. Despite not having spoken in 6 months, she answered on the second ring. "Eleanor, what a lovely surprise! How are you, honey?" "Margaret, I need your help, and I need it right now. My grandchildren are trying to steal my house and have me committed to a nursing home against my will." There was a pause. Then Margaret's voice turned sharp and professional. "Tell me everything. Start from the beginning and don't leave out any details." I told her about the fake vacation, the fraudulent boarding pass, the letter, and their claim that they'd already put my house on the market. Margaret listened without interrupting, and I could hear her typing furiously on her computer. "Eleanor, those little bastards have just committed about 6 different felonies. Elder abuse, fraud, false imprisonment, potentially breaking and entering if they've actually entered your house without permission. Are you somewhere safe right now?" "I'm at Denver International Airport, sitting in a lounge. They said someone from an assisted living facility is supposed to pick me up in about 2 hours. Like hell they are. I'm sending my associate David to pick you up right now. He'll be there in 30 minutes. Don't go anywhere with anyone else. Don't sign anything, and don't talk to anyone claiming to be from a nursing home. We're going to destroy these kids legally, and then we're going to make sure they regret the day they were born." My second call was to my neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, who lived next door and had a key to my house for emergencies. She was 68, sharp as a tack, and had been suspicious of my grandchildren's frequent visits over the past few weeks. "Eleanor, aren't you supposed to be on a plane to Hawaii right now?" "Carmen, I need you to do me a huge favor. Can you go look at my house right now and tell me if anyone's there?" "Of course, honey. Hold on, let me walk over." "Oh my God, Eleanor! There's a moving truck in your driveway, and I can see people carrying boxes out of your front door. What's going on?" My blood pressure spiked so high I thought I might have a stroke right there in the airport lounge. "Carmen, I need you to call the police right now. Tell them there's a burglary in progress at my address. Those are not authorized movers." "I'm calling 911 right now. Eleanor, what happened? Are you okay?" "I'll explain everything later. Just please make sure the police get there and don't let them take anything else out of my house." My third call was to my bank. As a woman who had lived through the Great Depression as a child, I had never trusted putting all my money in one place. My grandchildren thought I was just a poor old lady living on Social Security, but I had been quietly saving and investing for 50 years. They had no idea that I had multiple accounts, investment portfolios, and even a safe deposit box full of gold coins that my husband had bought in the 1970s. First National Bank, this is Jennifer speaking. This is Eleanor Pedersen. I need to speak with someone about placing holds on all my accounts immediately. I have reason to believe someone may try to access them fraudulently. Of course, Mrs. Pedersen. Let me transfer you to our fraud department right away. Within 10 minutes, I had frozen every single account, changed all my passwords, and placed alerts on my credit reports. If my grandchildren thought they were going to finance their betrayal with my money, they had another thing coming. My fourth call was to my doctor, Dr. Sarah Williams, who had been treating me for 15 years and knew better than anyone that I was perfectly capable of living independently. Dr. Williams' office? This is Maria. This is Eleanor Pedersen. I need to speak with Dr. Williams right away. It's an emergency regarding someone trying to commit me against my will. Dr. Williams came to the phone immediately. Eleanor, what's going on? Are you all right? I explained the situation, and Dr. Williams was furious. Eleanor, you just had your annual physical last month. You're in better health than most people 20 years younger. I will testify in court, if necessary, that you are completely competent and capable of independent living. This is outrageous. I need you to document everything in my medical records right now. Every test, every evaluation, everything that proves I'm mentally and physically capable of making my own decisions. I'm doing it as we speak. I'm also going to call that assisted living facility and tell them that if they accept you without a proper medical evaluation and court order, they'll be facing a massive lawsuit. By the time Margaret's associate David arrived at the airport, I had made 12 more phone calls and set in motion a plan that would make my grandchildren wish they had never learned my name. David was a sharp young lawyer in his 30s who had clearly been briefed on the situation. Mrs. Patterson, I'm David Kim from Morrison, Klein & Associates. Margaret sent me to get you out of here and start fixing this mess your grandchildren created. David, before we leave, I want to make sure we have evidence of everything they've done. Can you help me document all of this? Absolutely. I've already started building the case file. We're going to nail them for elder abuse, fraud, conspiracy, theft, and probably a few other charges before we're done. As we walked through the airport, David explained what was happening at my house. The police arrived about 20 minutes ago. Your grandchildren were still there, directing movers to load your furniture into a truck. When the officers asked to see the proper authorization for the move, they couldn't produce anything. Jake tried to claim he had power of attorney, but when they asked to see the documents, he admitted he didn't actually have any legal authority. So they arrested them? All 3 of them. They're being charged with burglary, theft, elder abuse, and fraud. The moving company is cooperating fully. Apparently, your grandchildren hired them with a bad check, so they're facing additional charges for that, too. I felt a savage satisfaction hearing that, but I was just getting started. On the drive back to my house, I made more calls. I called my insurance company to report the attempted fraud. I called the realtor whose sign I could see in my front yard to inform them that the listing was unauthorized and fraudulent. I called my financial advisor to move my investments to more secure accounts. But the most important call I made was to my youngest son, Robert, who lived in Seattle and was Jake, Emma, and Tyler's uncle. Robert had always been the responsible one in the family, and he had no idea what his nephews and niece had been planning. "Mom, aren't you supposed to be in Hawaii right now?" "Robert, I need to tell you what your brother's children just tried to do to me." I laid out the entire story, from the fake vacation invitation to finding them robbing my house. Robert was silent for a long time after I finished. Then he said, in a voice I hadn't heard since he was a teenager and had caught his brother stealing money from my purse, "Mom, I am so sorry. I had no idea they were capable of something like this. What can I do to help? Right now, I just need you to know the truth about what happened. Your brother and sister-in-law raised some very bad children, and they need to face the consequences of their actions. They absolutely do. And Mom, I want you to know that Karen and I have been talking about having you come stay with us for extended visits. We have that big guest room, and the grandkids would love to spend more time with you. You don't ever have to worry about being alone or having nowhere to go." For the first time since reading that awful letter, I felt tears of gratitude instead of tears of betrayal. When we arrived at my house, it looked like a crime scene. Police cars were parked in the driveway, my front door was open, and there were boxes and furniture scattered across the lawn. Officer Martinez, a kind woman in her 40s, met me at the car. "Mrs. Patterson, I'm so sorry this happened to you. We've arrested the 3 individuals responsible, and we're working on recovering all of your belongings. The moving company is actually helping us put everything back where it belongs." "What about the house listing? Did they actually have the authority to put my house on the market?" "No, ma'am. We've already contacted the real estate agency. The listing was completely fraudulent. They forged your signature on all the paperwork. That's additional fraud charges right there." As I walked through my house, surveying the damage, I started to understand the full scope of what my grandchildren had planned. They hadn't just been planning to dump me in a nursing home. They had been systematically preparing to steal my entire life. In my bedroom, I found empty spaces where my jewelry box had been, where my mother's china cabinet had stood, where my husband's military medals had been displayed. They had taken everything of value, everything with sentimental meaning, everything that made this house my home. But they had made one crucial mistake. In their greed and arrogance, they had underestimated me completely. Margaret arrived at my house that evening with a briefcase full of legal documents and a smile that would have made a shark nervous. "Eleanor, I've spent the afternoon researching everything we can charge these little criminals with, and honey, we're going to crucify them. But before we start with the criminal charges, I want to talk to you about the civil lawsuit we're going to file." "Civil lawsuit?" "Oh, yes. We're going to sue them for emotional distress, attempted theft, fraud, elder abuse, and about 6 other things. But more importantly, we're going to demand punitive damages. I'm thinking we start at about $500,000 and see where we end up." "Margaret, they don't have that kind of money." "Maybe not now, but they're young and they'll be paying you for the rest of their lives. Every job they get, every raise they receive, every asset they accumulate, you'll get a piece of it until they've paid for what they did to you." Over the next few days, as the full story came out, I learned just how elaborate their scheme had been. They had been planning this for months, not weeks. Jake had quit his job 2 weeks earlier to focus full-time on liquidating my assets. Emma had already applied for jobs in other states, planning to disappear once they had stolen everything. Tyler had been researching offshore bank accounts where they could hide the money from my house sale.
They had researched the assisted living facility and specifically chosen one with a reputation for taking advantage of elderly residents who had no family advocates. They had planned to visit me once a month at first, then gradually stop coming altogether until I was completely isolated and forgotten. The fake boarding pass had been Jake's idea. He had worked briefly for an airline and knew how to create convincing-looking documents. The whole Hawaii trip story had been designed to get me out of the house willingly so they could rob me without having to physically overpower me. Most sickening of all, they had already been dividing up my possessions for weeks. Emma had claimed my grandmother's pearl necklace. Tyler had wanted my husband's coin collection. Jake had planned to sell my piano. The piano I had played hymns on every Sunday for 30 years. But here's what they hadn't counted on. I wasn't just some helpless old lady with no resources or connections. I was Eleanor Patterson, and I had been fighting battles before they were born. The criminal trial was set for 6 months later, but I wasn't content to wait for justice through the court system. I wanted them to understand immediately what they had lost by betraying me. My first move was to contact their employers. Jake had been working customer service for a telecommunications company. When I called his manager and explained that he was facing multiple felony charges for elder abuse and fraud, his termination was immediate. Emma was a marketing assistant at a startup company that prided itself on family values and social responsibility. When they learned that one of their employees was arrested for abandoning her grandmother at an airport, she was fired within hours. Tyler was a substitute teacher, and when I contacted the school district about his criminal charges, he was permanently removed from their substitute list and blacklisted from working in education. But that was just the beginning.
I had kept detailed records of every birthday gift, Christmas present, graduation gift, and financial help I had given my grandchildren over the years. The total came to over $60,000 in cash, plus countless hours of free babysitting, meals, and other support. Margaret helped me calculate that if they had been paying market rates for all the help I had provided over the years, they would have owed me over $150,000. We sent each of them a formal demand letter for immediate repayment of all gifts and services with interest. When they couldn't pay, because they had already spent most of their money on the designer clothes and expensive cars they were using to impress their friends, we placed liens on their assets and garnished their wages from any future employment. My second move was to make sure everyone in our extended family and social circle knew exactly what they had done. I wasn't vindictive about it. I simply told the truth. At family gatherings, church events, and community functions, when people asked about my grandchildren, I calmly explained how they had tried to abandon me at an airport and steal my house. The social consequences were swift and devastating. Their parents, my own children, were mortified and humiliated. Their friends and romantic partners learned what kind of people they really were. Other family members stopped inviting them to events and celebrations. They became pariahs in their own community. But my most satisfying revenge was still to come. During the investigation, police had seized their phones and computers as evidence. What they found was a group text thread between Jake, Emma, and Tyler, where they had been mocking me for months. They called me the old bat and Granny Moneybags. They joked about how gullible I was and how easy it would be to dump the dead weight once they got their hands on my assets. Most hurtful of all, they had been laughing about my loneliness since my husband died. Jake had written, "She's so desperate for attention, she'll believe anything if we just act like we care about her." Emma had responded, "I know, right? All we have to do is call her Grandma in that sweet voice, and she melts like butter." When Margaret showed me those text messages, I cried for the first time since this whole nightmare began. Not because I was sad, but because I was so angry that my own blood could be so cruel and callous about my love for them. That's when I decided they needed to learn what real consequences look like. I had Margaret file for a restraining order against all three of them, prohibiting them from coming within 500 feet of me or my property. I had her send cease and desist letters to their parents, informing them that any attempt to contact me on behalf of their children would result in harassment charges. Then I did something that I knew would hurt them more than any fine or jail sentence. I removed them from my will entirely. See, my grandchildren had grown up hearing stories about their great-grandfather's farm, which had been sold in the 1960s for what was then considered a small fortune. They knew I had inherited money from various relatives over the years. They assumed that someday they would inherit whatever I had left. What they didn't know was exactly how much that would be. I had Margaret arrange for a private investigator to conduct a comprehensive evaluation of my estate. The report showed that between my house, my investments, my savings accounts, my late husband's life insurance policies, and various other assets, I was worth just over $1.2 million. Under my original will, Jake, Emma, and Tyler would have each inherited about $200,000 after my other bequests were distributed. That was enough money to pay off their student loans, buy houses, start businesses, or secure their financial futures. Now, they would get nothing, not one penny. Instead, I rewrote my will to leave my entire estate to a combination of charities that work with elderly people, my responsible children who had never tried to take advantage of me, and a special scholarship fund I established for students studying gerontology and elder care. But I didn't just remove them from my will quietly. I had Margaret send them each a certified letter informing them of the change, along with a copy of the estate evaluation, so they could see exactly how much money their betrayal had cost them. Jake called me after receiving his letter, crying and begging for forgiveness. "Grandma, please, I made a mistake. I was scared about taking care of you, and I listened to bad advice. Please don't do this. I'll do anything to make it right." I let him finish his pathetic speech. Then I said, "Jake, do you remember what you wrote in that group text about me being desperate for attention? You said all you had to do was call me Grandma in that sweet voice and I melt like butter, right? Well, I'm not melting anymore." Emma tried a different approach. She came to my house, violating the restraining order, and stood on my front porch crying and screaming about how sorry she was. The neighbors called the police, and she was arrested for violating the protective order. Her bail was set for $5,000, which her parents had to pay because she couldn't afford it herself. Tyler sent me a 20-page letter detailing all the ways he has supposedly changed and learned from his mistakes. He promised to take care of me in my old age, to visit me every week, to be the grandson I had always wanted. He even claimed to have found religion and said he was praying for my forgiveness. I threw his letter in the trash without finishing it. The criminal trial took place 8 months after their arrest. All three of them had been forced to accept plea bargains because the evidence against them was overwhelming.
They each received 2 years of probation, 200 hours of community service specifically working with elderly people, and were ordered to pay restitution for all the costs associated with their crime. The moving truck, the police investigation, my legal fees, and the emotional distress they had caused. More importantly, they now all had felony convictions on their records, which meant they would struggle to find employment, housing, and educational opportunities for the rest of their lives. I attended every court hearing, sitting in the front row where they could see me. I never showed emotion, never reacted to their tears or their apologies or their promises to change. I just sat there, a constant reminder of the grandmother they had thrown away from money they never actually got. After the sentencing, Jake's father, my oldest son, Michael, approached me in the courthouse hallway. He looked like he had aged 10 years in the past 8 months. "Mom, I know you're angry, and you have every right to be, but they're my children, and I can't just abandon them. Is there any way we can work through this as a family?" I looked at my son, this man I had raised and loved and sacrificed for, and I felt sorry for him. "Michael, you can have whatever relationship you want with your children, but they are no longer my grandchildren. They made their choice when they left me at that airport and tried to steal everything I owned and abandon me in a nursing home. They can't have it both ways." Michael started to cry. "Please, Mom, they were young and stupid and scared. People make mistakes."
Michael, this wasn't a mistake. This was a months-long conspiracy to defraud and abandon me. They researched nursing homes. They forged legal documents. They quit their jobs to focus on stealing from me. They mocked my loneliness and grief in text messages. That's not a mistake. That's a character defect. I walked away from my son that day, and it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. But I had learned that sometimes protecting yourself means letting go of people you love, even when it breaks your heart. In the 2 years since their conviction, I've built a new life that's fuller and happier than I ever imagined possible. I travel now, real trips to real destinations, not fake boarding passes to nowhere. I've been to Italy, France, Ireland, and yes, even Hawaii. I went by myself and had a wonderful time. I've also become an advocate for elder abuse prevention. I speak at community centers in senior living facilities about the warning signs of financial exploitation and family manipulation. I've helped dozens of other seniors recognize and escape situations where their own families were taking advantage of them. My relationship with my responsible children has grown stronger. Robert and his wife Karen have me visit them in Seattle for a month every summer. My daughter Linda and I take annual cruises together. My youngest son David calls me every Sunday, and his children, my real grandchildren, love spending time with their grandmother who tells them stories and bakes them cookies and treats them with the respect and love they show me in return. As for Jake, Emma, and Tyler, they're all struggling with the consequences of their choices. Jake works at a fast food restaurant and lives in a studio apartment, paying garnished wages into my restitution account every month. Emma moved to another state, but can't find stable employment because of her criminal record. Tyler gave up on teaching and works odd jobs, still sending me formal letters of apology that I throw away without reading. Their parents have tried various approaches to reconcile us over the years. They've sent Christmas cards, birthday gifts, and family photos featuring the grandchildren I no longer acknowledge. They've had other family members approach me at funerals and weddings, pleading their case and asking me to forgive and forget. But I've learned something important in my 74 years. Forgiveness is not the same thing as foolishness. I can forgive my grandchildren for the hurt they caused me while still protecting myself from being hurt by them again. I can wish them well in their lives while refusing to give them another opportunity to betray my trust. The most satisfying part of my revenge isn't the money they lost or the criminal records they earned or even the family relationships they destroyed. It's the fact that they have to live every day knowing that they had a grandmother who loved them unconditionally, who would have given them anything they needed, who would have been there for them through every joy and sorrow of their lives. And they threw it all away from money they never got from a house they never succeeded in stealing. They had a grandmother who played piano at their birthday parties, who taught them to bake cookies, who kept photo albums full of their pictures, who bragged about their accomplishments to anyone who would listen. They had someone who remembered every story from their childhood, who knew exactly what gifts would make them smile, who would have moved heaven and earth to help them if they had just asked. Instead, they decided I was a burden to be discarded, a problem to be solved, an obstacle between them and what they thought they deserved. Now they know what it feels like to live without that kind of love. And unlike the money they tried to steal, that's something they can never get back. Some people think I was too harsh, that family should forgive family no matter what. But I disagree. I think family should treat family with respect, love, and honesty. I think grandchildren should honor their grandparents, not abandon them at airports with fake boarding passes. I think people who betray the trust of those who love them most should face real consequences for their actions. And I think sometimes the best revenge is simply living well while refusing to be anyone's victim ever again. So that's my story. That's what this 74-year-old grandmother did when her own grandchildren said, "Stay in the airport lounge, Grandma. We'll come back for you after check-in." I didn't just stay in that lounge waiting for them to come back. I came back for them instead. And I made sure they learned that you should never, ever underestimate someone who has spent 7 decades learning how to fight for what is right. The next time someone tells you to respect your elders, remember my story. We didn't get to be this old by being pushovers. We got here by being survivors. And sometimes survival means making sure the people who try to destroy you learn to regret that decision for the rest of their lives. They thought they were abandoning an old lady at an airport. Instead, they awakened a force of nature who had been quietly planning their downfall from the moment she realized what they had done. That's the difference between being old and being wise. And that's why you should never, ever mess with Grandma.